Hello again, my name is Erik Berglund. I'm the founder of The Language of Leadership. It's my great pleasure to bring to you this month's episode of How to Get Them to Do the Thing. This episode is brought to you in partnership with RTIlearning.com and CNR Magazine. This series is all about how to get them to do the thing. And today, we're going to talk about a thing that I find common in every single industry, but you particularly struggle with in the construction and restoration field. And that is, how do you get them to do the on-time thing? How do you handle the situation where somebody is chronically late, frequently absent, and you're not quite sure what to do in order to change that behavior? That's what we're going to dive deep in this week's episode. Now, before we talk about what to do, it's probably helpful to talk about what not to do in these situations. And some of them you already know, but let's just be super clear about it. What can't you do in these situations? Or I shouldn't say can't, but what shouldn't you do in these situations? Well, you probably shouldn't hit them with a baseball bat, verbally or physically, right? We probably recognize that writing them up or following your HR process, your administrative process, putting on some sort of consequence or punishment probably doesn't drive change. I'm not saying you might not need to document their absenteeism or lateness. I'm just saying that that's probably not going to change the behavior. Behavior is usually not changed long-term by consequence. It might be short-term, right? But you've done that before. You've written this person up. You've issued them a citation. You've documented it or followed whatever process you had before, and maybe they change for a couple months at best. How do you get somebody to really change their long-term behavior? That's what we're going to dive deeper into in the rest of this episode. Now, we know what not to do. A giant blow-up, a verbal beating, having an awkward conversation in front of everybody is probably not going to go and drive the behavioral change. But let's dive a little bit deeper into what does drive behavioral change. People change their behavior when they know there's something good for them. That's the only reason we change our behavior. And it's not narcissism or selfishness. You could say, oh, this new generation struggles with that. No, every generation did. It's got to be good for them. We, as the drivers of change, need to help them connect the dots on what behavior we want them to change and why it's good for them. And that's what's missing in your process for trying to get this person to do the on-time thing. Let's clarify a little bit more what I mean by on-time here, because you've got a variety of different transgressions that occur when it comes to time. I'm talking about a person who is frequently late to the job site, to the warehouse, and maybe it's on the order of 5, 15, 30 minutes, right? I'm not talking about somebody who doesn't show up or somebody who's frequently hours late. That person, I hope you know your course of action. That's got to be remediated immediately and never happen again, or there's no reason to even employ that individual, right? That's not who I'm talking about. I'm also not talking about the person who's occasionally late, because reality is we're all occasionally late. What I'm talking about is that person where it frequently happens, maybe every Tuesday, a couple times a month. Frequent enough that they're developing a label as the late person, right? Where your homeowners or your clients start to recognize that, oh, Billy's never here on time. Where the crew knows that they can't really rely on this individual. That's what I'm really talking about. Your chronic late individual. Because that individual, chronic poor performance, usually is a function of a poor process. And that's what we can start to solve for. What happens if you don't have this conversation? Let's build some more context, right? I'm going to get to how to do this, but what happens if you don't have the conversation with somebody who's chronically late? A few different things start to occur. One, the team members start not to trust them as much. They're going to be less effective, less efficient. Homeowners are going to think less of you. You got crew members that aren't even showing up. It becomes hard to plan labor accordingly. You're not sure how much you're going to get out of that individual that day. You start to build a culture where it's normal, where, well, Billy was 15 minutes late. It's not that big deal if I'm 5 minutes late, right? Other people start to take liberties when it's observed that it's okay to be late at this company. There are some pretty significant consequences beyond your own frustrations. That should serve as your fuel or your motivation to want to drive change. The mechanism for driving that change is going to be a conversation you need to have with this individual. And in order to begin that conversation, you need to get their attention immediately. Now, we're used to saying things like, you do that again and you're fired, right? A consequence-led attention getting isn't going to work very well. Now, we need to really tie this back to something that they care about. So I might need to approach Billy and say something along the lines of, hey, Billy, what I really want is for you to keep the respect of your peers. And I got to be honest, there's something that's happening lately that's going to make that pretty difficult. Could I share it with you and could we work through it? That would be an enrollment statement. You might tune back to some of the previous episodes we've done on how to give hard feedback or how to share any hard truth. You'll learn more about enrollment in that episode. But in short, enrollment is all about getting their attention by helping them identify what's in it for them to change. And with that individual, that version of Billy, I just appealed to their desire to have their peers respect them. That's a pretty common thing most individuals want, particularly in the trades. You might have to appeal to something different because that might not be relevant to this individual. Maybe they're a little bit of a cowboy and they don't really care what their peers think. Well, you could try something different, like, hey, Billy, what I really want is for you to have a long-term relationship with this company. I want you to have a long career here, but there's something that's been happening that if it were to continue, it's gonna make that impossible. Could I share it with you and could we work through it? Now I'm appealing more to their desire to retain their employment here. Not threatening them, but letting them know there's something that's gonna get in the way if we don't fix it. There's always something in it for that individual. Maybe it's their personal brand, maybe it's future opportunities or raises, maybe it's new responsibilities, maybe it's just keeping their dang job, but there's always something in it for them. And if you can start with an appeal to that, you'll get their attention, because that's what you really need. This might feel like a lot of extra work, but the game isn't to say the words to get them on time. The game is to get them to hear the words. And in order to get them to hear you, step one is to enroll them. Get them to know why it matters, whatever you're about to share with them. Now, nobody really says no to that. If you say, hey, Billy, what I'd really like to do is work with you so that you could gain the respect of your peers that I see has been missing lately. I see a few things that could help you. Would it be okay with a conversation? No one says no to that type of invite. You might change it a little bit and say it your way, but my point is almost everybody's responsive to someone who's trying to help them get what they want. And it might not be the moment right then and there. In fact, I would encourage you, the moment they say yes doesn't mean you have to have it right there. It's okay to say, great, let's pick that conversation up back at the warehouse tomorrow afternoon, or, could you swing by my office on Wednesday midday, or whatever it is. Set the stage to have the right conversation. And in that conversation, your job is going to be to help that individual break down the process failures that are leading them to be late. Again, we're talking about someone who's chronically late. This is a repeated issue. Because it's a repeated issue, there's probably a repeated performance issue. There's a repeated process breakdown for them. Fortunately, the process for being on time is one that you and I and most people understand pretty well. What's it really take to be on time? Well, you have to know what time you're supposed to be somewhere, and you have to know how much time it's going to take you to get from wherever you were to wherever you're supposed to be. That can be variable, right? For those of you that are in bigger cities, or maybe you've got a moving job site they're going to show up to, they're not always going to the same location every day, whatever it is, that individual needs to have a plan for how much time it's going to take them and to be able to account for some variability. So they need to know what time they need to be there and what time they need to leave in order to get there on time. Now, most people can't just wake up and jump in the truck. There's responsibilities they have to handle that morning as well. So there's a certain amount of time required for them to handle those responsibilities. Their kids, future meals, lunch, whatever it might be, any chores, wake up time with a cup of coffee, journaling, reading, whatever the heck it is they do in the morning, there's a chunk of time there that they need to plan for. And they probably need some buffer time, because we're human and no one takes the exact same amount of time getting ready every single day. In order to wake up on time, they probably need to set an alarm that accounts for all of that time between when they wake up and when they arrive at the job site. And they probably need to go to bed on time the night before in order to make that happen. It'd be helpful if they didn't drink too much. You can't control all of this, but what you can do is try to help that person think through the necessary steps to be successful more consistently. That's the conversation that's missing. So you go and you enroll them. You get Billy to say, yeah, I do want the respect of my peers. Sure, what do you got, boss? And then you start to ask questions. What time do you try to get to the office every day? Is it 7:55, 8:55, 6:55, whatever it is? 5 minutes early would be ideal, right? So they're gonna tell you, I try to get here at 8. Okay, let's start trying to aim to get here at 5 minutes early. So 7:55 is when you're trying to get here. How much time does it usually take you to get from your house to the office, the shop? They're gonna tell you a certain amount of time. Do you ever build in, buffer time, seasonality, extra traffic, anything along those lines? So with that in mind, what time do you really need to leave your house? Okay, so if you were to try to leave at 7:15, you've probably got a bunch of responsibilities that have to happen in the morning. What's your normal routine in the morning in order to get out the door? What all do you have to take care of before you can actually leave? And they'll tell you, kids, meals, chores, whatever it is, right? Help them think through that stack of time. Ask them, how much time does that normally take you? Most people are gonna tell you a smaller number than reality. I can do it in about 15 minutes. Yeah, but do you really wanna do it in 15 minutes? Like, how much time, if you had your way, would it really take you to do your morning well? If you win the morning, you win the day type attitude. Like, how much time does it take you to really own your responsibilities in the morning? Help them think through that time. And then we can ask the next question. Okay, if you had that amount of time, you're trying to leave at 7:15, it's gonna take you X amount of minutes in order to get all your responsibilities handled. What time do you really need to set your alarm in order to handle all of that? Help them say that out loud. I probably need to set my alarm at 6:55, whatever it is. What time have you been setting your alarm for? Here's where you'll start to uncover the gap, because they either are setting their alarm on time or they're not. They're either allocating enough time for their responsibilities or they're not. They're either leaving on time or they're not. They're arriving 5 minutes early or they're not, right? It all stacks up sequentially. You could go so far as, well, what time do you need to go to bed the night before in order to actually wake up functionally when that first alarm goes off, right? A lot of people hit their snooze button repeatedly. I personally don't like that, but some people take a little longer to wake up. This might all feel, by the way, like a conversation you don't think you should have to have as an adult or as a professional. And I agree with you, but whether I think we should have it or not doesn't really change whether it's gonna be helpful or not. This is an incredibly helpful conversation. And again, what were the consequences of not doing it? Low customer satisfaction, teams that are frustrated, unpredictable work variability, missing deadlines on jobs, right? it, building a culture where other people take their time and actually steal time from you, like the consequences of not having this conversation, I hope you're seeing, are higher than your feeling of like, I shouldn't have to do this to their professionals. They obviously have never been trained in this before. They don't know how to do it. If they did know how to do it, they would be more successful at it. I'm also not saying you need to go do this with everybody every time they're late. This is for your chronically late individuals, the people where it's a repeat offender issue. You could have this conversation or a shorter version of it every time someone's late, but you'd start to feel pretty micromanaging. You'd start to piss people off quite a bit. Don't do that. But if you go have this conversation with your chronically late people, you enroll them and help them recognize that they need to change this behavior because it'd be good for them. And then you ask them questions to help them think through the sequential steps necessary to be on time. Then you can ask the final question, which is, well, what time are you going to set your alarm for tomorrow? Or how are you going to make sure you follow the plan we just built, starting today? Make them tell you what they're going to do differently. You could even go so far as to ask, hey, if I see you slipping in that, if I see you late again in the future, is it okay with you if I bring it up to you and I ask you, what broke down in your process? Because that's what changes as well. When you have this conversation well, you've now set the stage for the next time they're late. And instead of going to Billy and saying, Billy, you're late again, what the heck, man? Instead, you can go, hey, Billy, I noticed you were late yesterday. What broke down in your process? Let's take a look at that together. Let's see if we can fix it. Hopefully, Billy's able to say, I left late. Okay, what caused you to leave late? I didn't allocate enough time for this. What do you need to do to allocate enough time? Need to set my alarm earlier. When can you do that? They can set their alarm right there. You change not only their likelihood of being on time, but you change your future conversation because you can ask specific questions about the process they're not following in order to help them adapt it so that they're on time more frequently. That's how you get people to do the on time thing. I can't iterate enough. This might feel like a conversation you don't think you should have to have, and maybe you're right. You don't have to go have this conversation, but the alternative is to let this issue continue, or to continue to try to use consequences or HR or write-ups or whatever it is in your system as the vehicle for change, which is usually not going to work very well for a chronically late individual. So I hope you'll take this advice. You'll go have this conversation and get your people to be on time. And I hope you come back next month for another episode of How to Get Them to Do the Thing. Thanks again for your time. I'm Erik Berglund from The Language of Leadership, and thanks again to rtilearning.com and CNR Magazine for hosting this season. We'll see you next time.